Hey everybody, my name is MetalMusicMan.
And I'm Professor Lex.
And this is episode 48 of the Metal and Lex podcast. Why are we celebrating 48? We the ones we celebrate are so random. Like by the time we get to like, what is it, 52 will be the, or is it 54? 52.
No, it's 52 weeks.
52 will be the year marker, and we're not going to have anything. It's just going to be the same air horns. It'll be awful.
Do you ever get self-conscious about the way that you, well, I shouldn't say it. Never mind.
Oh, it's too late. You've already put it in my head. The way I say something.
Do you ever get self-conscious about not that you're doing anything wrong in your reading when you welcome people to the Metal and Lex podcast, but like the way that you say it? I try and vary it, and then I get stuck in this loop of, did I vary it the same way?
No, if anything,
you just say the same thing.
Yeah, I just go and I do it. If anything, I have tried to make it more consistent. And less variable as we've gone in. If anything, I've been driving to. Well, it's one of those things like, so you don't want to like make up a catchphrase or anything.
No.
That's disingenuous, right? Like that's stupid. You don't want to yeah, right. You don't want to sit down and you've gotten a lot quieter suddenly. I feel like I turned here. Hello. You suddenly were very quiet to me. Anyway,
I'm sorry.
But yeah, if anything, I've driven towards like getting more consistent and
homogenized.
And so you don't want to make up a phrase, but it's I don't know when it happened because it is organic, as you said, but it kind of became like, we do the intro. Hey everybody, my name is MetalMusicMan, and then I do a weird announcer deep voice thing for the episode, and that's it. It works. I think that's our thing now.
It's a formula. We've been doing it for 48 episodes. Yeah, that's nearly a year.
We're basically professionals at this point. I mean, we've never been paid for anything, but don't let that stop us. Oh, good times. So anyway, we've got an episode today that we're just gonna respond to a rather long question that Soul of Bass on YouTube. I'm gonna assume it's Soul of Bass and not Soul of Bass. There's no way he's a pro fisher. He might be a big fisher. He might be,
or he might be a big fish.
He might just be a big fish. At least in his soul, he's a big fish.
Yeah, deep down, in his heart of hearts.
So anyway.
Shout outs to Soul of Bass. We hope we haven't alienated you.
Yeah, he's already gone. So he asked us a little question. Shout outs in general. He's been doing some comments. He's been giving us the engagement metrics, which are fantastic. We love when people engage with our content. So thank you for that.
Do you know him, or did he just?
I don't think I do.
Us?
Let me creep on you, Soul of Bass, on your YouTube. Who are you on YouTube? You have.
You don't have to tell us.
You have content. No, I do not know who you are.
Damn, so that's like an organic viewer.
Yeah, you appear to be. If I do know who you are and I can't tell who you are after looking at your YouTube just now, I am so sorry. But you know what? That can be your next comment if you would like. Why do you listen? Why do you listen to us? Why do you know who we are? Why are you here? Why would you ever listen to us?
We're horrible.
Anyway, we're awful. So he's got a question about some fighting game things. I'm gonna pull this up and I'm gonna read it.
This was a comment left on episode number 47. Right?
Yes. Yes, on Ghost Woke to GameStonk Boogaloo, which is, in my opinion, one of my better titles.
One of the strongest. Yeah,
I don't know that anything beats black people in space, but it's definitely
for or against Will.
It's definitely up there. Look, man, I'm still mulling that one over. You gotta, I'm just not sure. All right. So he says, hey, here's a question. I'm not a big fighting game person, but I used to like them casually. My main criticism of fighting games as an outsider is that I don't feel they've innovated very much. Particularly, it seems to me that outside of champion pick, which I think he just means character pick, so I'm guessing he's a filthy MOBA player.
League of Legends, Dota.
You filthy MOBA player. So particularly it seems to me that outside of character pick, strategy doesn't play much into the games. We're pinning that one hard. It's mostly about memory and reaction speed, also pinning. These things aren't very easy to appreciate from a more cerebral standpoint. And I'm also pinning, but in a more positive, interesting way than the last pins. Like when it comes to speed, one person is faster than the other until another person is faster. Until another person is faster.
last
These points are why I really wanted to respond to this. I think this is a really good comment. So anyway, so these things aren't very easy to appreciate from a more cerebral standpoint. Like when it comes to speed, one person is faster than the other until another person is faster. The speed isn't so noticeable so much as the difference is. So watching two semi-pros looks the same as watching two pros in the finals, at least from a casual standpoint. Pins.
Pin. Yep.
So the question is, do you think there's room to innovate in the genre Super Pin? For me, I'd like to see fighting games borrow from other genres. Yakuza, for example, is a nice combination of RPG mechanics with fighting, but not really a traditional fighter. Is there a place for leveling up within a two-player fighting game? Could neutral objectives be put inside a fighting game that will let characters increase their stats, gain moves? I mean, I know items in Smash Bros. And that is kind of like, and what that is kind of like, but what about putting some enemies to fight or something to last hit? Oh man, he's just turning it into a MOBA.
That one I don't get. What does last hit mean? Is that like,
I'll tell you.
Get the experience?
Yes, but no. I've talked to you about this in an old podcast once upon a time because it's one of my most hated mechanics in any game ever is last hitting. So that's a very interesting one. There's so many things here. This is such a great comment. I mean, innovation in fighting games might be a decent topic since you guys seem to take my input on Razors of the Past to heart. So anyway, so I think this is a great one. So I guess we'll just go down the list unless you have a particular one you want to.
Oh, no. It's okay. I'll see how well I can do to not make overarching points until we get to the end. I'll try and do this point by point by point.
I mean, if you've got a whole thing,
we'll get them. Okay. We'll get them. I think as sort of a like a prerequisite of knowledge for our fighting game backgrounds, I'm sure we've talked about it plenty. You come from a Smash background, and then when it comes to traditional fighting games, you have a very core traditional fighting game background, specifically 2D Street Fighter games.
Yeah, and Street Fighter 2 and Street Fighter 4.
Street Fighter games.
Yep.
So not even like the more anime style. And I got
Mortal
my
Kombat 2. I did play some Mortal Kombat. Never like competitively, but like if we're going like real origins, that's definitely up there. Yeah.
For me, my background is largely in anime games and in Marvel, which for me I think is a lot more freeing than the strict rigidity of Street Fighter, but that'll factor into.
I reject the loaded word choice you used just now.
Freeing.
Anyway, was that it for you? I thought you had.
That is. Wait, unless you have anything else that you want to say, like this is your baggage you're taking in.
No, those are fair backgrounds, and I think a lot of people who have listened to this podcast at this point, do know. I mean, I think I'm a really weird duck. Just as a reminder, though, for sure, like there aren't a lot of by game shul, as I think we called it last time this came up. There aren't a lot of by game shul players when it comes to the Smash community versus every other fighting game. There are hundreds of us, dozens perhaps, or something, right? Like it's certainly more common now, at least for people to dip their toe. But I still, even with the toe dipping, I don't know. Yeah, I was pretty good at two different sets of games, and like a lot of people never really do that. I mean, you've got like Leffen at the high level who played Dragon Ball and some other shit. Back in the day, you have Forward, who was really big in Melee and pretty big in Marvel. So it happens, but it's not that common. So anyway, those are our credentials. Okay, so his first point here is, my main criticism of fighting games is, as an outsider, I don't think they've really innovated very much. And we're just going to full stop on that because I think, like I said, there's just so many things. So I don't know about you, Alex, but I actually agree with this. And I think there are ways that just the statement that they haven't innovated very much, I think there are ways that is awful and ways that it is great. I think there are tenets of the fighting game genre that I think are so good that it's good that they haven't been innovated from, and then there are other staples of it that either A, just haven't innovated because I don't know why, or B, they have like doubled down on and I wish they would innovate more, or C, I guess those are kind of the same point, but so I guess those are both the A, and then the B is that there are times when they have tried to innovate and it has failed.
Sure.
So, well, yeah, I don't know. Before I get into my examples, do you agree or disagree with what I said and what he said at this point?
I think I can understand why, from an outsider or casual perspective, it's easy to say that games, or fighting games specifically, haven't been innovating or innovated in over the course of several years. But I mean, if you look at it, back in the day, like your original Street Fighter, your Karate Fighter, all of those prototypical fighting games, your only real options were to move forwards, to move backwards, like walk forwards, walk backwards, and then hit the other guy to make his health drop. I think since then we've introduced dashing, we've introduced air dashing. There's for
combo
games
systems,
hitting someone
unique
more than
game
one
systems.
time.
Yeah.
So the way that you play with how you hit somebody has been innovated upon. The way that you maneuver through physical space has been innovated, either in terms of speed, additional options, or moving into the foreground and background with games like Tekken and Soul Calibur. And then, I don't know, the games, they just keep getting sort of weirder, and for me that feels like innovation. I like the progression of thought, and to me it seems like depending on the game that you're playing, they are testing for specific knowledge or specific ideas. So like a game like Skullgirls really does reward you for being familiar with combo routes, because the whole game is cruxed around that.
I would argue, though, that from his point that I could be wrong. So, but my interpretation of his point, as I read this comment with this particular line, is that none of that is innovation. All of that is logical progression of the same concept. And I don't know that I fully can disagree with his point that I just made for him in my mind, based on what I assume he's trying to say. Because I think there's certainly an amount of innovation that is natural, right? Like when you're, okay, let's look at bicycles. If you start with like bikes that are big ass wheels back in the day.
Yeah, they got the big wheel in the front and the tiny wheel in the
and then
back.
eventually like the wheels get smaller, you get gears. To one definition, that certainly is innovation. To another definition, it isn't at all, and it's just progression of an existing concept, I feel like, which isn't necessarily innovating. Like innovating, I feel like sometimes, and the way that he has worded the rest of this question to me implies that he's looking for
wings on a
truly,
bike.
Yes, and I think there are ways that's stupid, frankly, to look for. But it's not a point that people don't. It's not a point that people don't make, especially people who don't play fighting games. And so, but I think there's a lot of really good stuff in that too. So as I shit on Soul of Bass for giving us a topic and listening to our podcast, but like I do think like I don't mean that in like the, I'm not like trying to be like, fuck you. This is my point is like, I hear a lot of people make this comment about fighting games, and I think there are a lot of ways that comments like this have merit, but there's also a lot of ways where it's just people who don't play fighting games wanting fighting games to not be fighting games. And I think that's why this is such an interesting comment, because because I think on the stupid side, there are also ways the people who play fighting games and like them aren't willing to have certain kinds of innovations. And that's stupid. And then, so I guess what I think is very interesting about a topic like this is like trying to decide what things are things that you need to be like, no, you people who play fighting games are dumb for wanting this. Because I think there are things like that, and we'll get to it. Last sitting. But also there are, on the flip side, plenty of times where the stupid is on the side of the fighting game community. This is an area where I will always defend, like, say, Street Fighter V, where people are like, the combos need to be harder. And we talked about this a couple episodes back, where I do agree that Street Fighter V has a stagnant gameplay design and stagnant combo design. I super agree with that, and I think that's a huge reason why the game is ass. But I also super duper disagree that the reason that it's stale is because it's not as difficult.
Yeah.
I think there is plenty of difficulty in that game, and I think the combos are stale and boring because the combos are stale and boring. I think it's as simple as that. I do not think there is any correlation between the lack of expression in Street Fighter V and the lack of difficulty. There is a lack of expression because there's a lack of expression.
Yeah.
Period.
I don't know that making the combos harder would make it any more expressive.
It wouldn't. Yeah. If the combos were hard, it would still be boring. And that's where people are confused because Street Fighter 4 was both expressive and difficult, people confuse the fact
correlated them.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't think that's a thing. So, back onto specifically the initial thing of how they haven't innovated, I would argue that there are lots of innovations in various fighting games. I think there are also games that don't. So I think what's a great example of innovation for the current era? I would say
ARMS.
No.
I know this isn't the point that you want to make, but I'm going to.
Oh God, it might be the point he wants to make, which is why I hate that you just said it. But oh fuck. Yeah, ARMS. Goddamn ARMS. Gross.
I hate ARMS. ARMS makes me angry to think about. I'm mad
innovative
that
as fuck, though. It's innovative as fuck.
And you know what the problem is? You and I just a second ago were looking at this in terms of like bicycles and like a logical progression of thought versus slapping wings on a bicycle.
ARMS is a shooter that's also a fighting game. That's also
it's not a fighting game to me.
But it is too.
Must be a
but
fighting
also it
game,
is. Yeah.
And I think that's that knee-jerk reaction that that we had when I mentioned ARMS is the exact point of like the fear of too much innovation. Because like look at ARMS and look at how weird it is, because it is a first-person shooter and you like charge up your punches and you throw them across the screen.
Do you think it's more 3D, a shooter or more a fighting game?
I think it's a fighting game.
I think it's more a fighting game than it is a shooter. I love playing ARMS with my nephews. It's fun as fuck. Sure. But I don't think I'd ever want to compare. It is so it is so different than every other fighting game that it has a recognize it. It has a completely different set of fundamentals, right? And yet, there are still some. Yeah, I think ARMS is wow. Good job, Alex.
Yeah, at a certain point. Wings on a bicycle, it stops being a bicycle and starts being an airplane. I don't know that we're there yet.
It does at a certain point, and I will actually say another really innovative one, less crazily different, but is like Rivals of Aether. And I think it's easy for people to look at Rivals of Aether and say, oh, well, it's just 2D Smash. But it really isn't. There are a lot of differences in Rivals of Aether, the core one being that there is no blocking or shielding. There is only parrying.
Weird.
Did you know that?
No, I don't know anything about Rivals of Aether.
So Rivals of Aether
I get it confused with Brawlhalla.
It's basically it's basically two-dimensional pixelated Smash Brothers, but there is no shield mechanic, and so therefore there is no shield pressure. Therefore there is no block shield pressure.
Pokes, no block pressure, yeah.
There is only parrying. That's it. You can parry. So it'd be like imagine, I guess for argument's sake, imagine Third Strike, and there's no blocking, and there's only parrying. Oh wait, that's how Third Strike is, because Third Strike is an awful game that no one should like. Hey, okay, Third Strike is a great game that I hate. Let me walk that back. I really do believe Third Strike is a great game that I hate. Third Strike to me is a lot like Killer Instinct. It's a great game that I just fucking hate, and it isn't Street Fighter. But anyway, it's a totally different thing. But yeah, so anyway, Rivals of Aether is a lot different. But I think your point about ARMS is really good, and so. I think to close off this point as we're going down the list, I think you are right and wrong. I think that is a very fair thing to think, and also a thing that you think Soul of Bass because you're probably less aware of the genre. So on some areas, background. Yeah, exactly. Sure. Yeah. And I think a lot of people from the outside do think that, and I think the reason that they think that plays into his next point. And we'll keep addressing. This will be a theme of this topic because this is again, I think it's a really good question.
It's a great question.
It's a question that is good because of your unfamiliarity with the genre. I think people's ignorance of the genre leads them to ask very good and bad questions, and I think that's
which is the best way to innovate.
Yeah. This is like the best. That's why this is such a good comment.
Pre-existing knowledge.
Yeah, exactly. That's like why it is such a good comment, because it has like there's things that you only will ask or think if you aren't taking for granted.
If you don't
stuff.
have that, and if you don't have that baggage we have.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so then particularly it seems to me that outside of champion pick, strategy doesn't play much into the games. It's mostly about memory and reaction speed. I cannot stress enough how good and bad of a statement and question this is. So we're just going to keep getting better and worse. So there is so much strategy in fighting games. That is so wrong and not true. But also,
I can see why you would think that.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And then also it being mostly about memory and reaction speed. This is also so good and bad in different ways. So, okay. So I will first point out, and agree that there is more than any other genre of games. There is way more of a reaction speed skill floor to fighting games than most other genres.
Yeah, you're trying to be good.
I think the only other games that have a higher, APM is like your RTSs, obviously. But I would even personally argue that, your StarCraft or your other, whatever RTS you want to look at, I would even personally argue that
first-person shooters?
No. Shooters are really good games, but they do not come close, in my opinion. There is a lot of twitch in shooters, but let me finish this point. So in an RTS, you're going to have way higher actions per minute than a fighting game. It's just not even close to no genre. That's just period. There is just no comparison. I don't care how much you don't like hearing that about your favorite competitive gaming genre, but nothing can or ever will compare to an RTS in terms of actions per minute. It just can't.
Yes.
But I do think there is a large difference between raw APM and reaction speed. Because I think there is a lot less reaction checking in an RTS than there is in a fighting game. I think there's way less reaction checking because while, you're going to react to things and see what your opponent is doing and you're doing everything at 1,000,000 miles an hour, there is a lot less per interaction to lose, relatively speaking. Like, you're managing all 5,000 of your different armies. You're building all of your guys. You're microing someone else. That is a huge mental stack check. And I would say is still a bigger mental stack check than anything probably at all.
Fighting games.
And I would probably put fighting games right after that in terms of mental stack check personally.
I'd say there's a gap, but then
But I think RTS is unquestionably is like a bigger mental stack check and a bigger actions per minute check. But I still feel like the weight of each individual decision and reaction is, in my opinion, higher in a fighting game than probably almost anything. There's a level of particular owned stress, like with each individual decision. I think in a fighting game than even in an RTS. And so while you definitely do need to have like good reaction speeds to play a fighting game, and it does stress those more than most genres, not than every genre, as we just went over with RTSs. While it does stress those, it does not invalidate or erase strategy at all. In fact, I would say that's a very gross misunderstanding, because there is a lot of strategy. Now, what I will agree with you on, before I argue more about why I think that's wrong, is that there are absolutely a lot of fighting games that diminish that. And this is an area where I super agree with you and where Alex is already smirking, because I actually do think a lot of fighting games really do try to diminish the strategy element and focus way more on combos, setups, situations, memorizing situations, etc. This is why I don't personally like Marvel or Skullgirls or all the games that Alex likes, because I think they do exactly what you're saying. But I don't think all fighting games do that. Anyway, Alex, explain to me why, defend
you're
yourself.
Wrong and
why,
stupid, yeah.
No,
Okay.
No, explain why you're a criminal and what you like should be illegal.
Oh, why I'm a war criminal.
Yeah.
Okay. So what I was going to say earlier was that, in a sense, there's no way, there's no plausible way that the meaning or the stakes of any individual decision that you make in an RTS could compare to the magnitude of a decision that you make in fighting games. Because if you're making 500 actions a second and each of those was as significant as something that happens in a fighting game, you would be so tired.
Yeah, absolutely.
There'd be no way to play.
Well, and that's not to say they don't get really tired, because they are really stressed.
Sure.
But I think as a quick other analog, this is always something that gets brought up to me about like MOBAs, where they're like, oh, they have all of these different characters and like I think a lot of people that play MOBAs don't understand, and this is just factual. I hope people don't get butthurt like hearing this, but like MOBA characters are easier to make and more shallow than fighting game characters. Period.
Or they should be.
No, I mean just period. There is no MOBA that ever had. There is no single character in a MOBA that is remotely as intricate or as nuanced as any fighting game character in any decent fighting game, and that's just the way the game is, because the game is meant to be played. The way the game is meant to be played, you have 5 different characters interacting. Okay. Also, MOBAs are intended to be just easier to pick up. This doesn't mean, I'm not saying there's no skill in a MOBA. I'm not saying MOBAs aren't extremely in-depth at a high level. And this is where I feel like every time I say this, people get like a knee-jerk defensive reaction. This is not me saying MOBAs take less skill than fighting games. That's not my point. But to learn to play a MOBA character, like just the character, to learn what the character does, takes less skill. And that's okay, because the skill in a MOBA, that's why you don't have people who are just like, I only play this character most of the time in MOBAs. Maybe like certain like ADCs, people are like known for playing one, but generally people are known as players of a role,
which is tank or DPS.
Because that is the skill check of a MOBA, is how many of these characters do you know how to play, because you need that flexibility. That's where the skill comes from the MOBA, is which character does well in this situation, how does he synergize with all of these other characters, and that's a very complex problem to solve. That's a very complex thing to learn and have that knowledge and be good at. But that's where that check comes, whereas like in a fighting game, there is some bleed over. Obviously, lots of people know how to play multiple different characters, and playing multiple characters does help you know more about the game, but it is a much harder check for an individual character in a fighting game than it is in a MOBA. And I think those are both very similar degrees of difficulty, but it's just that pin on the spectrum is moved more towards overall game and character knowledge in a MOBA, whereas in a fighting game, it's moved more towards individual character knowledge. Both genres have, though, a check, right? They both check the whole game. They both check individual knowledge and overall game knowledge. It's just one checks one a little bit more than the other and vice versa. So there is a lot of strategy in the game itself too, though. I know you're trying to get in. I'm sorry. I need to finish.
No,
this
you're
thought.
good. You're good.
So the other point while we're on the MOBAs is that when you say outside of champion pick strategy doesn't matter much in a fighting game, that is so far from the truth. Because now, to be fair, there are a lot of characters that are more slided towards the point that you're trying to make, which is to say that like if you play a Yun, generally rushdown characters, I think are a little less strategically diverse. At the end of the day, they're going to try and get in and fuck your shit up.
I want you to be wrong.
Okay?
I would like to be in your face, and I want you to be wrong when I'm there.
Yeah, and that's not to say that they don't have abilities to change and nuance. They definitely do, but just to make it easier for the point counterpoint, if you look at a character like Ryu, I mean, at the end of the day, he still wants to throw fireballs, sure, but holy shit, dude, like the amount of differentiation between like just playing keep away versus going full rush down versus doing like freaking weird ham shit, like depending on the character that you're fighting, but more importantly, the player. There are matchups that are say Ryu versus Sagat. You could play Ryu versus Sagat, and you could play it textbook Fireball War between the two, and you could think, okay, that's just the way Ryu versus Sagat is, and now I know the strategy of Ryu versus Sagat, and all there is to do is to play that. But that's so bullshit. Like you could run into a Sagat. Like it might be that the average one is that way, but you could run into a Sagat that's hella rushdown or a Ryu that's hella rushdown. There are matchups of Ryu versus Sagat where you would certainly expect Sagat to be the zoner, and Sagat ends up becoming the rushdown. But that changes. It doesn't change because of the character. It changes because of the player. So the characters are way more versatile than I think that argument gives them credit for. Way, way, way more.
Do you remember we were playing over at Hylians and we were just goofing around and you picked Ryu and I picked Sagat, and like round start you threw a fireball and then I Kara uppercutted you?
Yeah.
That's not how that matchup works, but that's how it was played because it was me behind the wheel. I have a difficult time zoning people because it gets not boring. It's a lot in the mental stack to attempt to zone someone. So when I saw that Will was like, yes, Ryu and Sagat, of course, the Fireball War, tale as old as time. Rocketed into his face and then just popped him one.
But like, and I think it's easy to come away that though being like, well, Alex doesn't play Sagat, that's why. But that's not why. There are absolutely like, I mean, even at the highest level, there are multiple examples of sets of people who are traditionally zoners that when they fight a certain player or certain character, they change things up. I mean, you can see.
Or as a set develops, because
even within the set, you might start. Yeah.
So Street Fighter games are played as a best 2 out of 3 rounds, right? So you reduce their life points to 0, you win that round, and then whoever wins 2 out of 3 in Street Fighter 4 specifically, that's the person who wins that game. And most sets, if they are played like standard and bracket, are 2 out of 3 games. So you have to win that whole thing twice before the other guy does. And that's setting aside grand finals where typically they move to a 3 out of 5 format, and also that you have to worry about a bracket reset. Games can get really long.
And
sets over the course of the game,
so much evolution. Yeah, holy shit.
If Will and I were playing and he was Ryu and I was Sagat and I did the Kara uppercut in the beginning, and he's like, well, whoa, what are you thinking? What are you doing? And every time he goes to throw a fireball, I just punch him in the face. He would have to necessarily change the strategy in order to continue to play. So Will make that adjustment, and he'll say, oh, Alex is being dumb and doing Alex things. I'm going to hit him back.
Or I'm going to block because I know he's going to throw this wild punch, and then you throw me. That's mind games. That's the core of strategic evolution.
Yes, and that's how the strategy develops.
Yeah, and I think you have so much more of that in fighting games than you do in most genres. Maybe than any genre. I think the individual... Here, this is the way, I mean, obviously I'm biased just because I love fighting games in general, but I think even outside of my love for it, I think it's really hard to refute the individual expression that comes from like that one-on-one, the gameplay as a conversation in fighting games. In my experience, there isn't a lot more, there isn't a lot better example of that than fighting games. I think things that get very close to me or can beat it, I think like duels in shooting games are really up there.
You get your 1v1 scenarios.
And your shooter duel games are a lot less popular these days compared to the team shooter. And team shooters have a lot of benefit, but I think anytime you end up on a team, you just invariably do lose some of that one-on-one expression. You get a lot of other good things for it, right? Like the cooperation, the ability
it's
to
a deliberate
team
trade-off
combos
for what you're testing.
But I think it is inherently a trade-off. Yeah, you do not get the same kind of conversation in a one-on-one shooter as you do in a 5-on-5 shooter. You do not get the same kind of conversation in, a MOBA. You can have snippets of it in team shooters the same way you could in a team MOBA. You could have your little, we're in bot lane and people try to come down from mid and they died, and now suddenly the whole team is dead except for like the 2 bot lanes, and now suddenly you've got like a little mini duel between your 2 ADCs. That's cool, but that's like the entire game in a fighting game and in a one-on-one shooter or even a one-on-one RTS really. I think you don't get that in team games. So I think like to say that there isn't an element of strategy is super wrong. But I also think there are a lot of fighting games that make it look like that isn't the case. I'm looking at you, Marvel players, and that's not to say that it's never in Marvel, which I think But I think, can you at least give me that the base Marvel of like, okay, what am I trying to say here? The average decent game of Marvel for me has so much less visible strategy than the average decent game of your Street Fighter. I will agree with you wholeheartedly because you used the word visible. I think that I think that's twofold. I think it's difficult for you to appreciate what's happening because you've got the knowledge of Street Fighter holding you back. You haven't been able to open and free your mind and embrace Skullgirls or whatever. I don't even think that. I just think it's harder to see. I will also hang on the visible. It is harder to see. That is half of my problem with the Marvel-like games is that you can't fucking tell what's going on. I know a shit ton. A lot of people can't, though. I think this is always more people can't. A lot of people can't. I know a shit ton about fighting games. I am fucking in a niche of a niche of a niche. And what annoys me about a lot of people who like those games is not that they like them, and is not that they want people to like them. It's that they either refuse to or can't fathom how much more niche they are than 99.9% of people. That is what frustrates me. Like, it doesn't bother me that people like them. It doesn't even bother me that they want people to like them or that they wish people understood them more. It bothers me when, like, you, and this is not you specifically, you're much better at this than most people, but there are a lot of, I'm just going to say Marvel players and be an asshole, but like, there are a lot of Marvel players where, like, they will tell you a thing is cool and you're just like, yeah, I don't understand what's happening. And their immediate go-to is that you're just like shitting on them to be a dick. And it's like, no, man, because they can't fathom. They're like, oh, how could you not understand this? It's like, dude, there is so much shit going on. They're like, did you see that? Yeah. And then you go, no. And they think that you're like trolling them, you know? And they're like, but like, I'm not. Like, I look at the screen. There's a million explosions. There's fucking 6 characters. Fucking two of the characters on each team of 3 are literally filling the entire screen with explosions, while another character jumps so high that you literally cannot see the characters that matter. And a mix-up happens off the screen where you literally cannot see it. And then people are like, oh my God, that was so sick. And I'm just like, no. I immediately lose interest. So there are a lot of fighting games that reinforce that. And I will say, as someone who loves fighting games, and I think I've said this before multiple times in this podcast, but like, as someone who loves fighting games and think they're the most beautiful thing on planet Earth, I fucking hate 80% of fighting games.
I do feel like Marvel is specifically skill testing for things that you don't value. I think Marvel and Skullgirls specifically are skill testing for like knowledge of combo routes, awareness of things that you physically can't perceive. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think you think that's dumb, and I do. I'm confident saying that, and I understand that is inherently alienating. The fact that without knowing all of these intricate little details, I am aware of the fact that if you don't have that knowledge, you won't know what's happening. There is no chance that average Joe can spectate Marvel. And not all Marvel. There's some Marvel, but like the overall, there's a lot that can be understood. There is no chance that, and I don't mean average Joe. Like this is what I think always gets fucking people butthurt. But it's like when I say average Joe, I don't fucking mean people who grew up with Marvel characters and think Marvel characters are cool, right? Like to me, the metric of what makes a good competitive spectator sport is like how engaging can it be to somebody who doesn't know anything about it, and how intelligible can it be? And that's not to say that you can't have a good game that is super in-depth, or that you shouldn't like extremely overcomplicated games like Path of Exile or whatever. That's not my point. But you're talking about two very different things. And so I feel like when you're talking to somebody like we are now, who is not someone who's a member of the genre, I just can't accept anyone arguing that Marvel is a good thing to feed them. It's not intuitive.
Yeah, it's like so to me this is the exact same deal. Okay, let me give this exact situation within Street Fighter 4. Okay, so this is the same thing as when like a new person comes in and they show some interest in Street Fighter, and that guy comes up from the back and he's like, "Oh, you want to play this game? Yo, let me show you how to do this fucking sick combo with Ryu." And I just want to punch that person in the face. I'm like, that's not what this newbie needs. They need to know how to fireball and how to crouch hard punch. Well, the game is about that, but it's going ahead. It's like if somebody came up to you, let's just go even further back in our analogies. It's like if somebody came up to you and they were like, "Hey, I want to know how to ride a bike." And you were like, "Oh, dude, check out this sick Harley that I built." You're just like, bro, no, shut the fuck up. You're just going to scare them away. You need to stop talking. And then that person gets mad, right? Because like they don't understand.
How do you not understand? It's a beautiful bike. Do you not think it's a beautiful bike?
Yeah, and it's like, okay, I get it, but like this dude doesn't even know what a wheel is. Yeah. All right, we got to fucking.
Let's try and get him balanced on it first before we put him on the Harley.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like, so that to me is like there. I really do think like just objectively, if we're talking about like new, unawares people. I don't think there's any scenario where you show them a game like Marvel and it helps them understand. Again, I'm talking about people who are really, really, really green, like not like
fresh faced.
Yeah. I just don't think you could ever get them to understand anything about the genre and not feel overwhelmed and give up if you showed them a game like that. If you showed them Skullgirls, those games are
the majority of people.
They're advanced porn, dude. Like you've been jacking off so long to the same thing that now
then
only
you become numb to it.
Dude,
you can
only grandma murder porn gets you off now. Like some weird,
and it's specific.
Like
and there's nothing wrong if that's your thing. It's fine.
Like exactly. But like you have to understand
such a wealth of diversity.
Yeah, you are so far down the road though. Like so that's what I think is hard when that conversation comes up. But like I do, I hope I try to never come across as being like. And I don't think I ever do, but like some people seem to accuse me of being like, oh, he just thinks Marvel just doesn't have skill. Like I don't think that at all.
You must know that.
How could you possibly not think that it had skill? Like you know what I mean? But there are if you're talking about what is digestible, what is approachable, it's just not even there. So I think this is specifically what we've been. On now is where he says Soul of Bass in his comment says these things aren't very easy to appreciate from a cerebral standpoint, and I 100% agree
from
with
the outside
that
looking in.
For a lot of games, you will just look at them and you will not be able to tell what's going on. So this is why, and this there's opinion in here, but I'm pretty fucking sure I'm right. This is why Street Fighter and Smash are the best games to watch, and nothing comes close for the most part because they are the only games that are actually digestible for a new player. I would actually put so other games that I think are good for this. Sam Show games Sam that Show like really Sam Show is really easy to digest. It's really good to watch.
Which is kind of funny to me because the way that
Samurai Showdown works. Samurai Showdown is the game we're talking about.
Specifically the newest iteration, which is just called Samurai Showdown. I think that what's interesting is that one in particular is skill testing and values reactions over like matchup knowledge or things like that. Like where in Marvel you really do need to know that Firebrand has an unblockable. In Samurai Showdown, you know that they've got a sword, and you can probably tell pretty fast how long their sword is, and that's like the bar.
I would say more than reactions. I mean, Samurai Showdown definitely does value reactions very highly. It does not value, which again most fighting games do. That is an absolutely. I mean, that is an accurate thing. Like fighting games that. And that reminds me, fighting games, reactions, and balance things is where I'm going with this. But Sam Show in particular values fear. Sam Show is the kind of game where nobody wants to do anything. Nobody wants to do anything because anyone could die at any moment. And it's not like Marvel where you could die because the guy does some crazy infinite combo. You could die at any moment because the guy hits
someone cuts you
with
in half.
one button and you get cut in half and you die. Samurai Showdown is perhaps one of the best newbie fighting games ever because
you'll learn what spacing is. We don't have to sit here and argue about what
you learn spacing. You learn anti-airs. You learn how to apply and defend against pressure, but nothing you ever do in Samurai Showdown is more difficult than pressing one button followed by one input sequence. It's like, hard attack, quarter circle forward, light attack is the hardest thing you will ever,
generally speaking,
for the most part, have to do in that game. And you could just kill people. Like they just fucking die.
Yeah, with two buttons.
So I do want to talk about, because I think, and this is me interpreting and assuming an argument that wasn't directly made by Soul of Bass, but I think it's there because this is we're in the same wheelhouse. This is where a lot of people I think dislike the reaction element and think that the reaction element diminishes the strategy element. They feel like, oh, I'm so good at this like strategy where if I could just react or I could do the technical aspects of things, then I would be really good at this game. But because I don't want to put the time in to get the technical aspect down, to get the reaction aspect down, I don't want to put that time in. I won't be able to play the game, and
or I
and
can't because I'm too old.
Well, okay. I mean, I think that's just horseshit in any.
But
age
like,
thing is
if you're
bullshit.
an 18-year-old, your reactions are going to be better than a 50-year-old's.
Sure, but they're not so better that it's relevant. I will defend to the end of the day, like that. That's not. No, that's not. There is. I can't think of a single game where that is so relevant that if you're doing better strategy, it wins. At the end of the day, as long as you have an acceptable, whatever definition of that you want to have, an acceptable, like competitive reaction speed, competitive actions per minute, If you're in, if somebody has 10% more actions per minute than you, or 10% better reaction speed, that does not defeat superior strategy. It does not defeat superior decision making ever. It only wins if you're on the same level in those other two things. And if that's the case, then you're already losing anyway, in my opinion.
Yeah. Well, and that's secretly the point that I was driving at in Samurai Showdown. The people who win are not the children. They're the people who understand pressure.
Yeah.
Use reaction so much. You still need to know what you're doing.
The strategy beats everything in Sam's show because of that.
Trumps all.
Yeah. Your strategy,
how important they all.
Yes, your strategy beats everything in that game. So, okay, so hang on. So this is a point I really want to make, though, about the difficulty of approachability of fighting games. Because... and this actually bleeds into, we're doing a really good job here. So, refresher, he says, these things aren't very easy to appreciate from a cerebral standpoint. When it comes to speed, one person is faster than the other until the other person is faster. The speed isn't so noticeable so much as the difference is. So watching two semi-pros looks the same as watching two pros, blah, 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 blah. So, disagree. Here's why. So the thing that a lot of people make as a point, and I think that he was probably driving to. If you're not, I apologize for putting it in your mouth. But I think this is kind of where you're going with this.
This is the point we will address.
Well, I mean, I think it's part and parcel to what he said as well. But like a lot of people are like, well, you know, that difficult element of doing things physically, like I'm not interested in it because I think it takes away from my ability to get to the strategic part of the game. And I think that is just a fundamental understanding of what's happening. And I say this as someone who does agree generally that fighting games should be easier than they have been historically. I don't think they should not be hard at all, though. I don't think there should be no check. And here's why. And this is maybe a hot take for some of you, but I really hope people listen to it and think about it. I think the main reason there is so much more... we'll say, what's the word I want to use here? I think the reason there is so much more variability to the perceived metas of fighting games, as far as who's good, who's bad, there's so much less overall meta agreement in fighting games compared to other games as far as who's good and who's bad. If you look at like fucking, World of Warcraft, if you look at any MOBA, if you look at fucking any shooting game, whatever, it is always so much more universally agreed upon than the average fighting game as far as what is good and what is bad. And that's not to say there aren't fighting games where there are clear top tiers. Obviously there are. That's not my point. But
obviously Marvel vs. Capcom 2 exists.
But the overall discussion is like, I'm playing Counter-Strike. Op is fucking OP. And I'm not saying Op needs to be nerfed. I think it's great that Op is OP. But everybody, like, there isn't anybody who ever is arguing that Op isn't that way. And then, like, as you go down the tier list of guns, I feel like you just have a much more centered, agreed upon tier list. And I feel like it's the same way, especially in MOBAs. In MOBAs, it's always like, this balance patch came out, right? Fucking this champion is now so OP that they are literally always banned, because you get bans in MOBAs. You get to say at the beginning of the game.
Pick some bans, yeah.
Yeah, you get to be like, who's banned? This guy's banned, right? These 5 champions are banned, whatever. It's almost always the same ones within a very small pool. And in my opinion, that is the reason that difficulty is important. Because... and I'm going to use World of Warcraft as an example now, because World of Warcraft is an awful competitive game in so many different ways, and yet it is a competitive game that people do play in arenas for money. But one of the things that always happens in World of Warcraft, and I think MOBAs are like fucking identical for this in a lot of ways, but I have less direct knowledge of them, so this will be a better example for me to make. But like, there are characters in World of Warcraft who are either just shit or godlike. And there is no fucking in between. And the reason for that is because there is no skill barrier. There is no tech skill, no input skill barrier. That lack of the barrier is why that occurs. Because when you have, let's say in World of Warcraft, you have 2 versus 2, and you typically will have a healer and a damage character. The damage character I'm going to use as an example is a Destruction Warlock. And the healer and the other damage don't matter. But you have a healer and a damager on each team. And one team has a Destruction Warlock. And Destruction Warlocks work thusly. They're kind of hard to kill for a caster. So casters wear cloth. They're usually weak. But for a caster, warlocks are pretty hard to kill. They have ways that they leech health back and all of this. And so for a caster, they're one of the hardest casters to kill. They're the tankiest caster. Okay. So the warlock stands still and the warlock says, you're going to hit me and try and kill me. And you have to hit me because I have this big move. And this move is called Chaos Bolt. What does Chaos Bolt do? You press the Chaos Bolt button and you start going Kamea and you channel and the cast takes, 2 seconds or something. And so the whole game basically revolves around, will they or won't they actually get an opportunity to Chaos Bolt me? And so the Warlock has the ability they can instantly fear you, which makes you run away from them. And you have no option but to run away. And this has like a cooldown timer. So basically the strategy comes out to be that the Warlock will Chaos Bolt you from a range to force you to come at them and hit them to prevent them from being able to Chaos Bolt. Because once someone's in your face, they have lots of different ways to prevent you from actually completing that cast. So then you start the Chaos Bolt cast, somebody comes in and attacks you. Once they're in, you do your fear thing. And then either A, you get the Chaos Bolt cast off because they're running in fear and you have other ways to prevent them. Once they're out far away, your team can synergize and do other ways to like stun them or slow them and prevent you from getting in and enable you to get that cast. Or B, the enemy that you did that instant fear to, they use some longer cooldown defensive ability that breaks the fear. Like they make themselves invincible and say, I will not be feared. But they can only do that every like 2 minutes. And your instant fear is like a 30-second cooldown or whatever. So basically what happens is either A, warlocks do enough damage based on the meta and based on the balance patches and the gear they have. Either they do enough damage to where they fear you, you break the fear, you come back in, and the next time they fear you again and they cast bolt you and you literally die instantly. Either A, that happens, or B, it doesn't happen. And so either the warlock is fucking worthless because they can never kill anyone because they just don't deal enough damage, or the second that they get one off, you instantly die and they're the best class in the entire game. And this has happened routinely back and forth over the course of World of Warcraft because either it does or doesn't do enough damage. And so warlocks are just constantly fucking dog shit or so broken that they're the only class that does anything and everybody plays a destruction warlock. So this is the value of difficulty. This is the value of difficulty because if warlocks can kill you or not kill you, and instead that's based off of doing something that's very hard to do, this is the difference of skill that differentiates somebody who does put the time into the game and somebody who doesn't. And I feel like a lot of times people have this idealized notion that if every game was just on quote unquote a level playing field and people who were practiced and put all of this time in and could do this hard thing. Well, if I could do that hard thing, I'd be just as good as you. Well, okay, but that's the whole fucking point. That's the whole point. This is like if you went in, this is like if you went into a gym and you were like, well, if I spent fucking 3 years of my life doing nothing but lifting weights in the gym, I could lift that weight just as well as you can. Yeah. And this is what I think people don't give. They don't give like credence to the difficulty of doing something. They look at if this is like if you looked at a choreographed fight scene in a movie and you were like, well, that guy just did 3 triple backflips and then round kicked the guy to the face. But I mean, shit, if I practiced that for a year, I'd be able to do that too. And you're like, yeah, that's why it's impressive. So
you remember it's a year he'd spent.
But that doesn't mean that there's no strategy. That doesn't. In fact, the strategy becomes even more insane because your mental stack is so stressed on trying to do the things that it makes it harder to actually react to the strategical elements. And this is a good thing because again, the problem with warlocks is that when they're good, there is no real way to stress them because what they're doing is literally just hitting one button to cast a Chaos Bolt. And no matter what you're doing, no matter how much pressure you put on them, they're not under pressure because all they have to do is hit one button. Whereas if you change that up and you have a match between, any other number of characters in World of Warcraft, it's much more stressful. So not only does the game become predictable and not only do balance issues rear their ugly heads much more pronounced and just become impossible to avoid when there's no difficulty, it also becomes boring because it's predictable and it's imbalanced. So I literally think that actual mechanical difficulty is both a barrier between boring and unbalanced gameplay and something that richens and deepens the strategy. And this is why, to me, fighting games are the best shit. And it's why, for me, well, it's not the only reason, but it's one of many reasons that most MOBAs to me are not appealing, and I find them highly restrictive and simplistic. And that, again, doesn't mean they don't take a shit ton of skill, but the things that they test are not interesting to me.
You do not
more often than not, and more importantly, the individual conversations are less interesting because the characters are more simplistic, and because the most important things in a lot of MOBAs, and I keep saying a lot of MOBAs because there are some that I actually do like, which we'll get to, but specifically in MOBAs like League of Legends, I think when he talks about last hitting and things like that, to me, last hitting is you're testing a single player skill in a multiplayer game. And that doesn't interest me. Last hitting is very difficult. Last hitting is extremely hard to do. And if only you could last hit, then you would be as good as the guy that's really good at last hitting. But a lot of people are so good at last hitting. I think Faker, they're like so good at it that no one can even challenge them. And that is the exact same argument that I just made about fighting games in a lot of ways. The only way that, in my opinion, it's different is that last hitting is a skill that really doesn't have a lot to do with your conversation with the other player. And I think pressure strings and mix-ups do. But I also will admit that that's a sliding scale, right? Like the more these pressure strings are insane and incapable to be reacted to, the closer you get to Marvel, the less I feel that way. And so that while I feel like there are
an uncanny valley.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think there are lots of interactions in MOBAs that are on the good side, of my opinion, where they do have appropriate character interaction, and then there are some that don't. And I put last hitting on the side that to me just doesn't. It isn't. Last hitting to me is like last hitting to me is a fighting game where for the first 30 seconds of every match, you both play Tetris to see who gets a damage buff. That's what last hitting is to me. That's what the lane phase is to me. It is very hard to do well in the laning phase. You are rewarded or punished for how well you do in laning phase, and that does affect your team fight phase, and that is a test of skill. But to me, that's like asking someone how well they can do yo-yo tricks while playing basketball. Which, yep, it's my favorite argument.
Shout-outs to episode 1.
Shout-outs to episode 1 or 2 or whatever episode it was. I am not interested in that test. Anyway, that's my scene for now.
Oh, no. No, it makes sense. I don't have enough MOBA experience or WoW experience to weigh in on a lot of that. I do appreciate the barrier to execution, specifically in fighting games, that thing that we're all afraid of, because I feel like it does reward people for having spent so much time in the gym. There's the classic, if someone whiffs an uppercut against you and you're Ryu in Street Fighter 4, you get a free punish. You can hit them however you want. Let's say, for the sake of argument, you don't have any meter, so you can't just fucking unload on them. What you can do, if you're so inclined, since you can do anything, is press Stand Fierce and then do an uppercut. That'll do a goodly amount of damage. It'll knock them down. It does everything you've ever wanted to do.
I'm going to briefly interject for how Marvel you are right now, that your most basic combo is a two-hit combo.
2 hits?
We're going to go back. So what you can do for a lot of people is throw or sweep. That's actually step 1.
Sweep is good.
You get a free throw or free sweep. So then layer 2 is what you just described. And then now please continue on to layer 3.
Layer 3 is your upper echelon, because Street Fighter caps out at 3 layers. What you can do is forward fierce, his solar plexus punch, and then a 1-frame link, which means that out of a whole second, you have 1/60th of a second to time this next button press. You can do a crouch fierce, and then you can do that same uppercut that we were talking about before.
I would argue that's layer 4, because I think for layer 3...
Where's 3?
3 in my opinion, is a simple 2-piece into an FADC into a simple 2-piece. That's easier than a 1-frame link. Meter spend. Cancel.
You don't have meter at the top of this.
It is definitive. Okay, but difficulty wise, it is definitively easier to simply do button into Tatsu than it is to do button into Fireball into focus attack dash cancel into button into Tatsu.
Sure.
Okay.
But I said you don't have meter.
But you're getting hung up on you're getting hung up on what you have available like option wise. But to me, like that is a very important difficulty step that is both harder than the previous step and easier than the next one, being your one frame link.
Sure.
Okay.
But that is importantly where this caps out. You're doing your one frame link from Solar Plexus into Crouch Fierce. It will up your damage considerably, significantly. It's not like they won't die in one combo. This isn't Samurai Showdown, but it does do a significant enough amount of damage to warrant it if you're consistent at it. So for a lot of people, if they have been spending enough time practicing, they'll go to it. Or those same people, like pros, like top level players, will not. They will just do Stand Fierce into Dragon Punch because they don't want to risk being wrong, or the stress of the situation is so difficult, they're worried they don't trust themselves to be able to make that difficult choice every single time. And I think that is a meaningful decision because of the amount of difficulty involved in it.
It's also something that builds like hype, right? Because even if you don't know it was a one frame link, everyone can see that like he did a little something extra or didn't in this scenario. I think for me personally, I think that's a super good example that you brought up. And I think this does a really good job of illustrating different types of fighting game players, which you and I are also a great example of. Different. For me, I think we both agree 100% on like you should have some time rewarded in the gym. I think our main difference of opinion is actually just how much you should be rewarded. And I think you should be rewarded noticeably and definitively. And you think you should be like able to fucking basically like dance in outer space with anti-gravity lapses or something like so just as an example, the difference between if somebody does this punishable situation that Alex just mentioned where somebody dragon punches and you get a free punish, if you're a beginner player, you can just sweep them. It's just all you do is press down and hard kick, you sweep them. It does, what's a sweep do in Street Fighter? 100 damage. It does 100 damage, it knocks them off their feet. That's a solid punish. Your level 2 that we were at, button into something else might do 200 or 220 damage. So you get about double damage for level 1 to level 2. And level 2 is very easy. Level 2 is like if you play the game for, I don't know, a week and you're committed, you could definitely start doing that as a thing.
2-button punish, yeah.
2-button punish is no big deal. I think there's a fairly large jump from the level 2 to the level 3 where you're doing a meter FADC. But you're only getting for level 2, say for level 2, you're getting that 220 damage. People have 1,000 health in Street Fighter for reference. So level 1 is 100 damage punish is 1 button. 2-button punish is like maybe 200 or 220 damage. 3-button punish, it's not 3-button, but yeah, we'll say either a 3-button punish
the next step,
or an FADC combo might be 300 damage. So it's not that much more. And then your level 4, which is really hard, might be 350 or 360 damage. So there's basically like that to me is perfect. Level 1 to level 2 is a giant jump, and it's not a lot of work to get to level 2. It's almost no work at all, but it's an important distinction that you put that work in. And then you have like diminishing returns as you go to level 3 and level 4. They're meaningful, but I would use the phrase minimally meaningful. They are the minimum amount of meaningfulness like necessary to make it enticing.
A meaningful choice, yeah.
Whereas in Marvel, not only in my opinion are there bigger gaps between each step, but then you've got, I would say, how many levels do you think you have in Marvel for a punish? Over level 4.
I'm going
7 levels higher. Because like you could literally kill any character in Marvel pretty much with a single punish if you're good enough.
There's more extenuating circumstances. If you can't kill them,
you put them into a mix-up that means they might get killed. Your ability to punish is not only more intricate in terms of what you need to do to get the punish, like we're talking about in Street Fighter, where you'd have your hardest thing is going to be maybe if you say you did a 1-frame FADC into 1-frame FADC, we're talking 2 1-frame links, so 2 1/60 of a second lengths, as well as maybe 6 buttons total. In Marvel. In Marvel, you might have
doing a combo for the next 5 minutes.
You could be comboing for 5 minutes. You might have not in terms of hits, in terms of multi-hit, not in terms of the combo counter, but in terms of buttons. You could easily have a quote 20 hit sequence or something in Marvel off of a punish.
If you made a mistake and I was an asshole, if you made a mistake and I was playing Dante in the middle, I could punish you with a team aerial counter into a TAC infinite, or team aerial combo into a TAC infinite. And the damage on that combo does so little, I will literally run out the clock before I kill you.
Yes. So
the amount of buttons is like exponentially higher.
This to me is where we get to the point where someone like Soul of Bass, like that's where his point is so understandable, and I agree with him. But that's why I also just don't understand how more fighting game players don't see that difference in the spectrum. I know so many fighting game players that are just like, oh man, I play Street Fighter and Marvel and I don't see any difference between these two games. And I'm just like, how could you not? How could you not? So yeah, that to me is where that technical barrier, the reward for your gym time is way too much, in my opinion.
For what it's worth, how it feels to me as a Marvel player of like a decent caliber, the amount of weight that you have to lift to get in to be lifting in the gym, the smallest weight that they have is like 100 pounds. You have to be able to bench 100 pounds.
Oh man, I would almost say it's even heavier than that. Honestly,
I wouldn't.
We're talking about skill floors. There's a way. there's a way higher skill floor in Marvel than Street Fighter. It's not even remotely.
You could
close.
lift like 5-pound weights in Street Fighter, 2-pound weights, even if you really just want to press.
The gym thing is actually fantastic. So like Street Fighter is like professional cycling. It's kind of hard to learn how to ride a bicycle, but it's really easy to find a bicycle with training wheels. Most people probably rode bikes when they were kids, and even if they never rode bikes competitively, they know some amount about how to ride a bike even when they're 30, if they decide to get into competitive bike riding. And once you get into it, you can push it and you can go really, really high and you can ride in the Tour de France. And but the skill floor is so low for Street Fighter and the skill floor is very, 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 very high. Marvel is like if you wanted to be a bodybuilder. And you can't just decide to be a bodybuilder at 30 if you've never lifted weights in your life. There is no immediate path into that. There just isn't.
You have to go to the gym.
You are going to have years before you're even remotely capable of getting close to starting that path. That to me is I think that's a very fair comparison. I don't know if you agree or not, but that is how I see.
It's not as bad as you think.
That.
Yeah, it's not as easy as I think it is, but it's not as hard as you think. Really, honestly, you could play a handful of characters. You're not restricted. I'm not saying you must play Hulk, who does 4-hit combos and kills people. But you, at your current ability to lift weights, would be able to
personally?
Marvel. You personally.
Oh, absolutely. But I'm not who we're talking about. That's my whole point. I'm a fucking seasoned fighting game veteran.
These are mountains to move.
They are for people who don't play fighting games. No, I think they are. I'm not talking about for me. I have years of experience. Of course I could do it. But for a new person who's never played a fighting game and doesn't know anything about it, a person who's never ridden a bike, they cannot pick up Marvel and be good at it.
Bodybuilder.
That's
what I was going to say. I would not leap straight to Marvel. I think that Marvel would make for a poor first game to play.
That's an understatement. Yeah, absolutely.
I think that if you try cycling and you give it a try and you're good at it for about a month, you can probably pick up bodybuilding.
Yeah. Okay. It's not. It doesn't literally take years to be good at Marvel, but I would I would say for someone who knows absolutely nothing and has no experience, and the only experience they have is some general experience of playing video games, but they've never played any fighting games ever. I would say you're talking, dude.
Before they can compete at top level,
not even top level. I mean, even I would say compete. I would say compete. I would say compete at a mid level. It would be at least a year.
Jeff plays fighting games like for fun, like a weirdo. Hi, Jeff. He enjoys the basic core concept of fighting games. But if we played Marvel, it would be ugly. I think the amount of time conversely that it takes to get
viable, and by viable I mean have a reasonable chance of going 1
and 2
or something like that, like having enough competence that even if you go 0-2, they might have been like close matches and you knew what you were doing. That amount of time in Street Fighter or Smash might only be 3 or 4 months for somebody who doesn't have any experience at all.
With a passing awareness
if they decided they wanted to do it and they wanted to start at point blank, not ground zero, but start it. But they wanted to start it at the very beginning and try and like really understand it. Like they truly have an interest in understanding it. I think that might be months. I think it's at least a year, if not even longer, in a game like Marvel. If that's the first game you pick up.
You got nothing. Probably.
And it becomes exponentially easier if you start that person out with Street Fighter first, and then later, once they understand what basic combos and fighting game inputs are, then they can discover Marvel. Then that's way easier. But I think that just supports the whole point, right? Which is that Marvel is the kind of game that is just a whole tier of unfamiliarity and scariness away for the average person. So okay.
I know that we're starting to run out of time. There are a couple of points towards the end of his question.
Yes, that's where I'm pushing in. Yeah,
but by all means,
there's the borrowing things from other genres, Yakuza RPG mechanics. I'll let you start on this because I've been going hard. So
okay, so there's this. We'll start with the RPG series. Do what?
Please do what I think you're going to do.
Yeah. There's this RPG series called Persona. It has in it all the standard RPG fanfare. There's magic meter. There's health. There's other characters that help you out in your fight. It's got status ailments. So like you've got poison, you've got confusion, you've got rage. And all of these they took and translated them into Persona 4 Arena. Persona 4 Arena is a fighting game that has a lot of RPG ideas translated into it. So it's not that they've never had this idea before, but noticeably the difference between a game like Persona 4 and a game like ARMS, even though it's got a lot of inspiration from RPGs, it still feels like a fighting game, and I can easily and clearly recognize it, and it doesn't make sense. It is definitely a fighting game. So like I played a character we'll call Culprit, and Culprit has a system where if he lands a super, which should sound reasonably easy for a Street Fighter player to process. If he lands a super, then he can inflict status ailments. So he gets like a damage buff. He can hit you with a move that makes you confused. So left is right, right is left. Mm-hmm. Or he can make you poisoned or whatever. And that all feels like a good way of borrowing ideas from another genre and then making them into fighting game, translating them into fighting game. It does not feel like an RPG fighting game hybrid in much the same way that Yakuza is a beat 'em up RPG hybrid sort of game. There are characters in it, like Junpei has a system. He's a baseball player, and I'm only barely going to be able to describe this. If he hits you, then he lands hits like on a baseball field. Like if you hit somebody, then you get a single.
Okay.
If he whiffs 3 times, that's 3 strikes, and he's out. And then his counter resets. And the goal is to get enough runs that you can turn into Golden Junpei, who is a much better but still the worst character in the game.
Oh, he's like a weird meter build reward character.
Gotcha. Yeah. So like, and so there's that. There's Phoenix Wright in Marvel 3.
Phoenix, Frank, and Dark Phoenix. All those like weird mechanic building. Dark Phoenix is the same. Phoenix. She's less. No. You don't think she's the same? I think she's the same.
because I'm making a different point.
Okay. Okay.
Phoenix Wright is a character from Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney, which is a visual novel where you collect evidence and then go to court, unlike real life. So you collect the evidence and then you present it in the visual novel to make your argument and then win cases. In the fighting game, you find bad evidence and good evidence, and then you have to object, which is a move. And if the objection lands when you've got 3 pieces of good evidence, then you become the upgraded Phoenix Wright. Frank West is from a survival horror game where the experience system in that game is from when he takes pictures. So when they translated this into Marvel 3, he's got different levels, 1 to 5, that are based on the amount of... when he takes a picture, it gives him 1 experience. But when you do a 50-hit combo and then take a picture, then it gives you 51 experience. So that's a way that they've translated these weird experience system survival horror mechanics into the fighting game.
You
but
are
it's always
the
been on a
perfect
translational
person
basis
to answer this fucking.
I really am.
You are literally.
They do this thing that you're describing. The problem is Phoenix Wright sucks. He's the worst character in the game. Junpei sucks. He's so bad. And it's because they're trying to be true to the spirit of the game while also still having to play a fighting game. So
and
like,
that's the problem
probably,
is like when you get too far away, it isn't a fighting game anymore. So there's nothing wrong with enjoying like an RPG beat 'em up combo. And I will say that like beat 'em up games certainly, they lend themselves to RPG mechanics very well. Other
Much
genres don't. I mean, there are just certain genres that don't go as well together. And yeah, fighting games, I think you can have some degree.
You can have the flavor.
Yeah, you can have some flavor. I think you could have one that goes, where over time in the course of a match you get like different upgrades or whatever. But the problem is then it needs to end up then being a much longer game per game, and then
usually, or the fact that the longevity of the game is only 99 seconds or whatever means that the amount of power that you get from it is either too high or too little, and normally game companies will err on the side of too little.
I agree with that. And then like, so it becomes like, I think there are better and worse examples of it, but one that we forgot to mention earlier because we did address this a bit when you were talking about the innovation aspect. And I think this is sort of hand in hand with that. What the fuck is that stupid game we commentated at Smash
Lethal
Out?
League.
Lethal League. So
I like Lethal League.
Yeah, Soul of Bass, you should look up Lethal League. So that was one we should have mentioned earlier, because that's another game where I think it's okay.
It's a fighting game?
It is a fighting game, but I think there's always going to be like, once you get far enough away from fighting game stuff, like the further away you get, eventually it's harder to be like, is it really? And I think the answer is usually yes, but it's also like almost a subgenre where it's like, more less traditional fighting game where the win conditions
Platform
are not.
fighter,
Right. And I think Smash is. I think Smash is as much of a fighting game as anything else. I will fucking take that to my grave, because you have 2D fighters and 3D fighters, and nobody has a problem with that. You have team fighters, and nobody has a problem with that. Smash is literally just a platform fighter. Period.
It's because they changed the relationship between the characters and their health bars.
Yes, and that is the biggest difference.
Not when you reduce their health to zero, because there is no health.
And I think, at least for how Smash has developed and how other platform fighters now, like Rivals of Aether, have developed, I think they are absolutely defined enough to just be another kind of fighting game. Whereas your ARMS and your Lethal League are like a little farther away.
They're on the verge.
There haven't been quite enough
fighting.
Yeah, they need to kind of like hammer some things out, and exactly. But there are games that are in that area. So and I think one of them could be a more RPG focused game. I actually think a game that could potentially do really well with this concept is Samurai Showdown. I think they could do really well in Samurai Showdown to have some sort of like intermission phase where you end up like buying items like you do in a fucking MOBA. I don't know that I would like it or that it would work, but I think it's a great candidate for this, because and I think another important one to mention before we finish is Street Fighter Cross Tekken, and how they fucked that game by allowing you to buy gems outside of the game and increase your character's power. I think it was awful, because Street Fighter Cross Tekken was just a traditional fighting game with a weird shoehorned in RPG mechanic that made the balance awful and just made the playing field super not level. But I don't think it's impossible for there to be some sort of, and I think a good example of this that isn't strictly a fighting game but is kind of teeter-tottering in the same way ARMS is, are these online medieval duelist RPG games. What the fuck is it called?
Valorant.
Valorant's a shooter. What the fuck is it called? It's like, but it's like
For Honor.
I think that's it. I think it's For Honor. Let me Google that real quick and make sure I'm not lying. I think For Honor is the one I'm thinking of. But there's these games. Yeah, you're right. There's these games that like they're not strictly a fighting game, but they're certainly fighting game adjacent. They have combos. They have footsies. They're usually like third person over the shoulder or maybe first person. But I think those are some really good candidates for that, where like you do have very similar fighting game gameplay. It's not strictly a fighting game, because it's not, usually that ends up being 2D more or less, but like 2D camera, again, not 2D graphics. It's not important. Sure. But they're certainly in that realm where it seems like other mechanics in the game are acceptable that allow you to like both level up your character and fight. I think definitively for me, and maybe I'm just too old school, but I don't think so. I think a core element of fighting games that I really don't think can ever be broken and have it still be a fighting game is the level playing field. I personally don't think there is any room for RPG elements in what I would call a fighting game. That doesn't mean there can't be games that take elements from fighting games and have RPG elements. That doesn't mean those games can't be cool or fun or have interesting depth. But for me, and it's the same way for me in RTSs and shooters. As soon as you put in an element that isn't strictly player versus player and everybody having access to the same potential choices, right? And like you could say like, oh, Terrans versus, Protoss is different. But at the end of the day, you could both pick Terran if that was it. You need to both be able to pick that. As soon as you are like, hey, I got this item and now I'm just going to be better than you, the way it is in like World of Warcraft. As much as I enjoy World of Warcraft, what? Oh, well, okay. Yeah, if you played Smash with Items, God, that, yeah. As soon as you introduce that, it is no longer a level playing field and it is no longer a pure competitive game. That doesn't mean it can't be competitive. Exactly. It doesn't mean there can't be some cool competition in World of Warcraft PvP, but when they do World of Warcraft PvP as an esport, they put everyone on a tournament server and everyone has infinite gold and everyone can buy all the same items. Why? Because it would be bullshit. When I'm playing World of Warcraft on the weekend, I could have better gear than someone and that does carry me. And that's fine and fun, but at the end of the day, it would be ridiculous to have a tournament with that in it. Even so much so that a game like World of Warcraft that has exactly what I think he's talking about, where you have some minor RPG elements, it intentionally goes out of its way to kill all of those elements because it's just, I don't think there's any way around it. I think that's objective. It's shit. RNG elements, things that are not level, are shit for competition. Period. Yeah. They just are. And even when you look at games that are way more rooted in RNG, like say like Magic the Gathering, they don't play full deck as their real tournament shit because there's just too many fucking variables and too many things where some guy could have this card.
Oh yeah.
The real tournaments are the current deck, and so while yes, there is RNG within that league because of that current deck, it is a very controlled RNG, and it's more like poker where your ability to deal with having an element of grinding and quote unquote gear and shit, it just isn't. It has no place in a tournament.
Consider this other thing, as long as we're talking about trading card games. The most powerful effects, or frequently some of the most powerful effects in trading card games, are the games that allow you to manipulate the cards that are currently in your deck. So usually you have a deck and all of the best players will play the minimum card size for that deck. You'll draw your 5 to 7 cards, which means that there are now 35 or 33 cards left in your deck. And all of the card effects that you're going to be playing are cards that reduce the amount of cards in your deck or that go through your deck to find the cards that you want. You're reducing all of the random aspect. It might take you a turn or two, but it's a matter of like getting the cards that you want into your hand as fast as you can. You're reducing that random aspect by manipulation of your deck.
Yeah, there is a skill in dealing with that. And yeah, exactly. Whereas like conversely, if you're just like, oh, I've played this game for longer and so I have a bigger weapon than you and I just do more damage, that's not, there is no element. Yeah, exactly. So there has to be an element of skill at the end of the day. So RPG elements make things more approachable for people who are new. They certainly have a function. But at the end of the day, fighting games are meant to be competitive, and that's just not a thing. And I think it's okay if that's like not something you're interested in. But I think at the end of the day, any game genre that wants to be competitive needs to not have elements like that. Because even League of Legends, which like it's got RPG elements where you buy gear, you're buying that gear based off of what you did in that game when you both started at the same point. That's so different than in like, again, your World of Warcraft where you go into an arena and one guy just has a higher item level than the other guy because he's been doing more like, I don't know, raiding. It's just not a level playing field at any point, and that's not acceptable in a competitive environment.
Consider a strange beat-em-up RPG hybrid as a fighting game. There's a game called River City Ransom Kunio-kun series. It's very old. You can beat up each other if team attacks are turned on, and you can beat up random enemies, and that's the goal of the game. When you beat up random enemies, they drop coins. They explode into coins. Scott Pilgrim.
Mm-hmm.
Consider a hypothetical River City Ransom Girls fighting game where you and the other player are on the screen, and you beat up each other, but also beat up the guys. And then there's an intermission phase where you both go to the same shop and then buy whatever upgrades you feel like are good. And then you go back, and then it's just you and the other guy.
It would have to be done some way like that. Yes, it would have to be, because it would have to, however it would have to be such that every match had a level playing field to start. Yes. Absolutely. So, I don't know. I feel like we've gotten through most things, though, unless you had any other stuff. I think this was
I just wanted to talk about weird mechanics. Yeah, thank you, Soul of Bass.
Thank you, Soul of Bass, for this question. This was an excellent prompt. But yeah, I think we've made it to the end, and yeah, I don't know. I think that's about it. I didn't go on my full diatribe about last hitting, but I think I got enough of the small points about
you
why
snuck
I don't
it
like
in.
It, so, yeah. All right. Well, I guess I've been Metal Music Man.
I imagine I've been Professor Lex.
And thanks again to Soul of Bass. We will catch you guys next time.
See ya.